What's going on, everybody? Cryo here. Today we're taking a look at how I personally like to tank Halls of Atonement during Shadowlands' first season of Mythic Plus with the Prideful affix. Before we begin, I invite you to take a look at my pull-by-pull mechanics video first. There you can see exactly what each mob of every pack does in greater detail. This video is more about the pulls and route itself, with a few tips and tricks thrown in, so let's get it. These route imports are available for everyone's use, and you can find them on my website, link to that down below. This is another dungeon where the pulls do not have to change up drastically from week to week. There are some minor affix niches, but I do my best to explain them via the MDT notes. The only major differences are dependent on whether or not you can skip the upper courtyard. I do want to mention that my import strings have both options available. First things first. If you recall Freehold back in BFA, tanks would often get upset if you moved forward once the key was initiated. Well, same thing here. Moving forward will trigger the depraved Darkblades to run into position. It's not a huge deal, but if you can help it, try to stay put. This will allow the tank to gather up the first pull much more quickly and leave less of a chance that a healer or overeager DPS steals aggro. Regardless of the affixes, this is a pretty typical pull. If you do not have a death grip, it is imperative that someone interrupt the far obliterator, or else they will just stand back and cast on your group. Now you do see my health drop here, but this pull is not too scary, it just takes some time gathering them up. So healers, it's a good idea to preemptively pop an external on your tanks. As long as you sidestep the frontals, the only mechanic to worry about is the Gargan's Bleed. Make sure you have a solid way of tracking how many stacks you have, and get ready to kite. We all know that as a blood DK, kiting is easier said than done, and we have to rely on our teammates much more than others, but it is doable. Planning ahead and playing smart will keep you alive. Once you have a decent amount of threat, make frequent use of your Chains of Ice, Asphyxiate, and Death and Decay slow as long as you are running the Grip of the Dead talent. If you are a Venthyr in this dungeon, acquiring these Stoneborn Gargoyles can help make quick work of some AoE packs. However, as you see here, they are not very bright. Positioning can be brutal. After this first bat, I made the decision to let the priest take them from now on because I was moving around too much and the bat could not line up its breath. You will notice I did not snag the Houndmaster Patrol pack just yet. We probably could have done it, but I like to separate the Prideful packs just to make it more clear for you guys. I always suggest, if you can, make sure everyone is ready for the Prideful packs, cooldowns, healer manas, etc. One thing to note on the topic of blood decay and kiting, make sure you keep your bone shield from falling off. It is worth jumping back into the fray, even if just for a second, to get a Marrowrend cast off. At least this way you will have some sort of mitigation up should things go crazy. For the shard packs, ranged players and healers can outrange the Thrash cast, and I suggest doing this at all times if possible. This cuts down on a significant portion of damage, allowing your healer to either help DPS the shard itself or focus on something else. There is also a collector in this pack. You do not need to hard focus it down, but you do need to be cognizant of its Collect Sin cast. After the shard, you can opt into pulling the groundskeepers here. There is another set later on, but I find these ones a bit more manageable, especially with the residual Prideful buff. Once the awkward shard of Halkias is out of the way, follow the path back and head to the left side. This pull does require kicks or grips, not only to gather up the obliterators, but to minimize some of the wicked bolt damage going out. Interrupt and mitigate what you can. Typically I like to pull this shard back a tiny bit, simply to avoid accidentally pulling the groundskeepers to our left. As always, outrange the Thrash if you can, interrupt the Collector, and be mindful that this is a Prideful pack. After this Prideful is where the only real challenging pull occurs, and honestly you don't even need to pull as large as I did here. Because we have the ability to steal the Stoneborns, I risk a slightly larger pull, but if you take a look at MDT you can easily split this up and not waste too much time. First things first, I had one of the rogues sap the patrolling Houndmaster nearest the boss. Depending on where it is patrolling is how I decide when I pull it. Had it been much closer, I would have engaged with it and avoided pulling the other Houndmaster patrolling under the pergola. As you can see here, I start moving early just in case my group does not stop the Loyal Beast's cast. Even though it's not fortified, I would hate to be caught off guard and die to something that I could have prevented. If this were a fortified week, I would have cleared more trash and triggered our third Prideful before engaging this shard, but it wasn't and my healer was healthy. Thinking back, we probably could have pulled the boss after this Prideful. He does move extremely far away and we could have avoided the middle trash pack for now. Maybe that'll be the play next time we try Tyrannical, but for the sake of pugs, I would much rather clear the room first. This way, no one accidentally gets left out of the circle because the boss isn't in a normal position. Second thing to note, if you do have Venthyr, I recommend saving the courtyard bats for the boss on tyrannical weeks. It may not be a lot of damage single target, but every little bit helps, and Halkias can be a long fight. While fighting Halkias, I prefer that ranged players stack and move together. This will keep all of the debris in predictable places. As for melee, as long as they do not stack on the tank, they can do whatever. You will see me stand in the glass shards on purpose here, and that is because I also like to stack up my piles as best I can. Doing both of these methods will keep your area much clearer and make dodging the refracted synlight that much easier. I do wish I dragged the boss a tiny bit further before the beam casts, but sometimes the timings can be wonky here. We rinse and repeat until the boss is dead. For the next section, I will always recommend skipping the upper courtyard. This is doable by all parties and all comps with the help of invis pods, but it can be difficult to coordinate in pugs. If you have a rogue, it becomes much easier. If you had a clean run up until now, you could also opt into death running with a battle res. Either way, you want to be sure you are at 74.88% or higher. This will ensure that you only have to pull the bats just before the second boss in order to spawn Prideful. As you can see here, we were off 1% and needed to improvise. Good old Echelon. This fight can be really simple or really annoying depending on your group. The most important thing that I see pugs struggling with is grouping up the stone fiends and then blowing your cooldowns. All too often I'll see groups annihilating these little guys, with them all scattered, making it impossible to squash them with Echelon's stone shattering leap. Stack up, interrupt frequently, and then blow them up. Tips for blood DKs: I typically save my AMS and use it to negate the Curse of Stone. You should be able to alternate between AMS and IBF should you need it. This allows me to not be stunned, and we love not being stunned. It is okay if you do not destroy all the stone fiends in one go. You will get another shot before they revive and before more are summoned. You'll notice I save my mass grip. I usually use it when our group is spread out due to the blood on the ground, and gathering up the stone fiends would otherwise be difficult. It makes no sense to me when people use it when the room is clean and all you need to do is stack up and interrupt. Now for the infamous triple dog pull. As a slow DK, I prefer to fight these guys in a much larger room. Dragging them to the boss's area allows for my group to peel for me much easier, and I have a better time avoiding death by bleeds. You can also CC the Houndmasters first and then drag, or CC the dogs and LOS the Houndmasters. What I'm saying is there are a lot of ways to pull this off, just communicate with your group on what you want to do. Isn't this fun, guys? This is fun and engaging gameplay. On Tyrannical Weeks, I will not pull bats with this trash pack. Again, we use them on the boss instead. However, I always suggest LOSing. There are a few casters in here, and the priority always goes to the collector first and then the obliterators. Even on Tyrannical week, Elise is a breeze. I do not recommend using Bloodlust here, save it for the last boss. We did have 2 Venthyrs, so we utilized both bats. If your group has a single Venthyr, you can pull 1 bat at a time. Range classes should be able to reach them through the gate. If your group has a terrible composition for interrupts, only focus on kicking the volley of power. Tanks should be able to mitigate the bolts just fine. No tips or tricks here, just one thing to mention. I always ask if my healer is okay before going into the next room. There is a hidden amount of damage going out with the little ads running around and smacking everybody, and it leads straight into a Prideful pull, so I always make sure that we are in a solid position before Leroying into the mirror. Most everyone knows how to deal with this room by now. Just bring 3 balance druids and watch them go. But seriously, always focus down the tormented souls first. Ideally you want to get them all dead before Seagar casts his heal a second time. On explosive weeks, tanks will need to be extra vigilant and help out wherever you can. Assigning quadrants may be the play here. On necrotic weeks, tanks do your best to keep the envies together. They do affixate and they have wonky threat tables, but try your best. Once all the souls are dead, you can LOS the explosions and fight Seagar in the corridor. Remember, this will spawn your last Prideful, so managing mana and cooldowns is a must. Lord Chamberlain. I will say this, I hate the statues and they make me feel like a terrible player. Legend says you can tell which direction the statues are going to fly and avoid them, but I don't want to talk about it. Bruh. Be better than me and don't eat every single one of them. As for DKs, we can use AMS to negate the Stigma of Pride debuff. This prevents a lot of damage, and as long as you are not getting smashed by statues, your healer can DPS the entire time with the Prideful buff. No other damage should be going out. For Door of Shadows, obviously move out first, and then you want to stack directly under the boss. This will allow you to essentially soak 2 beams, but for now it only deals damage as if it were 1. This alleviates even more pressure from your healers. You can see here, Stigma of Pride is just destroying my health bar, and this is why we AMS. Depending on the timings, you may be able to AMS every one. Again, don't be like me. Bruh.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
Depending on your key level and how much you love your group, this is an excellent place to use AMZ. It was ugly at the end, but we had some good laughs, and a win is a win. That's all I have for you for this guide. I appreciate you guys hanging out with me, and hopefully you learned something new to take back to your group that will make your next Mythic Plus experience a good one. If you are enjoying this content, please do me a huge solid and hit that share button, leave a like, and comment down below which dungeon you would like to see next. Again, you can get my imports for MDT on my website, link for that down below. Also, feel free to join my Discord or catch me live on Twitch if you have any specific questions or just want to hang out with some like-minded people. I'm out of here, folks, but as always, stay frosty.